You know the feeling. You open a brand new piece of software or, you sign up for a new digital service to help you get through your workday.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Right. And you are immediately confronted by the exact same thing. You log in fully expecting a helpful dashboard or maybe a clear menu of options to guide you.
But instead you just get a blank, sprawling chat box.
Exactly. There is a little blinking cursor sitting there, practically tapping its foot, waiting for you to type a prompt.
It's just staring at you.
I mean, why has absolutely everything suddenly become an open-ended dialogue? You just wanted to quickly format a document or check your monthly analytics, and suddenly you're forced to have a full-blown conversation with your computer just to get started.
It's everywhere you look.
Mhm.
Over the last couple of years, the blank text field has just become the absolute default assumption for how you, the user, are supposed to interact with modern software.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, it doesn't matter if it's a simple note-taking app or complex enterprise software. The interface is just a chat window.
Which can feel, frankly, exhausting. And that shared frustration is exactly why we are diving into this topic today.
It's a really timely subject.
It really is. We have a genuinely fascinating article on the table for this deep dive titled, When AI Should Be Felt Not Seen. It's written by Tobias Reidenhag.
Right, he's the head of design at Intunio.
Yeah, Intunio, which is a specialized UX design and development studio based in Gothenburg, Sweden. Our mission today is to figure out why making artificial intelligence highly visible, specifically by slapping a conversational chat interface on absolutely everything, might actually be a massive red flag for lazy product design.
Which is a bold claim, but he backs it up beautifully.
It really does. And perhaps more importantly, we are going to explore Intunio's philosophy on why the actual future of AI relies heavily on it becoming completely invisible to you.
Yeah, the invisible AI concept is huge.
But if slapping a chat box on everything is just a symptom of lazy design, we really need to figure out how we got here in the first place. Okay, let's unpack this. Where did this sudden obsession with the blank text field even begin?
So to understand the origin of this obsession, we have to look back at the exact moment large language models, or LLMs, took their most recent massive leap forward in capability.
Right, when they suddenly got really good.
Exactly. When these underlying AI models suddenly became exponentially better at understanding context, generating human-like text, and reasoning through complex logic, the developers building them faced a pretty unique challenge.
It's just how to actually show that off, right?
Yeah. They needed a way to showcase that immense, boundless power to the public. And chat was just the most natural, immediate way to demonstrate those capabilities without having to set any artificial boundaries on what the system could do.
Because if a developer puts, say, 3 specific buttons on a screen, they are implicitly telling the user, hey, this software can only do these 3 specific things.
Precisely. But a blank chat box sends a very different message. It says, this software can do anything you can imagine.
Which sounds great on paper.
Oh, it is the core appeal from the builder's perspective. Builders, developers, and product managers love chat interfaces for a few highly rational reasons.
Like what?
First, a text box is incredibly quick to build from an engineering standpoint. I mean, it's just a text input field. Second, it is endlessly flexible, so it doesn't restrict the underlying AI model.
And it demos really well, doesn't it?
Oh, it is ridiculously easy to demo in a conference room. A startup founder can stand up in front of a board of venture capitalists, type a complex, highly specific query into a blank field, and watch the system write a poem, summarize a legal document, and write Python code right before their eyes.
It looks like pure magic in that setting.
It really does.
Yeah.
But the secret sauce here, the real reason the chat interface is a builder's dream, is that a blank chat box requires almost zero actual design decisions.
Wow. When you lay it out like that, you realize it is almost a way of outsourcing the user interface design directly to the user.
That's exactly what it is.
And just to make sure we are keeping our terms clear for the listener, we are talking about UI and UX here. UI, or user interface, is the literal surface you interact with. The buttons, the text fields, the layout.
Right, the visual mechanics.
Yeah. And UX, or user experience, is the holistic psychological journey of how you actually achieve your goal using that tool. So by just dropping a chat box on the screen, the developers are essentially skipping the hard work of both UI and UX design.
They are completely bypassing it. The chat box functions as a universal fallback.
A universal fallback. I like that phrase.
Yeah, because whether you, the user, need to analyze a massive data set, draft a sensitive email to a client, or make a complex strategic decision, the developer provides the exact same empty text input field.
Regardless of the context.
Right. And the insidious downstream effect of this universal fallback is the subtle shifting of blame. When the system fails to deliver the right result, or gives you a weird answer, what happens?
You get blamed for it.
Exactly. The software company doesn't frame it as a failure of their design. It is framed as a failure of your ability to communicate. You are told that you just didn't write a good enough prompt.
It's the classic, you're holding it wrong, defense, updated for the AI era.
That's a great way to put it.
Instead of the tool being broken, you are just a bad prompt engineer.
This raises an important question. Haven't we been here before? Tobias Reidenhag points out a brilliant historical parallel in his article.
Oh, right, the command line thing.
Yes, this heavy reliance on chat is, in many ways, just the rebirth of the old terminal or the command line interface from the early days of computing.
Like the old MS-DOS days, where you
Wow.
booted up your computer and just stared at a black screen with a blinking C prompt.
Very intimidating for most people.
Oh, absolutely. If you didn't hold the exact string of text or the specific directory command in your head, you were just staring at a brick wall.
And those old command line interfaces offered total, incredible freedom of action. I mean, you could make the computer do anything, but only if you possess the highly specific, esoteric knowledge required to wield the interface.
So they were powerful but hostile.
Exactly. They were effective for experts, and they were expressive, but they were notoriously hostile to everyday users. Today's chat interfaces operate on the exact same paradigm.
Except we're using natural language now.
Right. The only difference is that we are using natural language instead of programming code. For the people building the systems, it feels entirely rational because they believe they are giving you total, unfiltered access to the machine's brain.
Let me push back on that premise for a second, though. On the surface, isn't giving you, the user, total and boundless freedom an inherently good thing?
You would think so, yes.
Because if the system can do anything, it seems like I should be happy to have a tool that lets me ask for anything. It feels a little bit like carrying a Swiss Army knife.
Okay, I like where you're going with this.
A Swiss Army knife technically has the tools to do almost everything. It has the saw blade, the scissors, the little plastic toothpick, the tweezers.
The tiny little wire stripper?
Right. Having all those options folded up in your pocket feels incredibly empowering. But if you are standing in your kitchen on a Tuesday night and you just need to chop a carrot for dinner,
Yeah, you're not reaching for the Swiss Army knife.
no, you don't want to dig into your pocket, pull out a bulky pocket knife, and carefully fold out the tiny 2-inch blade. You would be infinitely better off if someone just handed you a dedicated, purpose-built chef's knife that was designed to do one thing perfectly.
The Swiss Army knife is the perfect analogy for the chat interface. It is infinitely flexible, but it is deeply unoptimized for the specific recurring tasks that make up most of our lives.
It's just not the right tool for chopping a carrot.
Exactly. The lack of optimization for chopping that specific carrot is exactly where the chat interface starts to break down and create friction for the person actually trying to use the software.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because if the open chat box is this wonderful, flexible dream for the developers who are building the software, we need to look at why it frequently turns into an absolute nightmare for you, the end user, trying to get through your workday.
And the nightmare really comes down to a well-documented psychological concept called cognitive load.
Which is how much mental effort you're expending.
Right. We constantly talk about modern software being user-friendly, but chat interfaces often place an immense, entirely invisible burden squarely on the human shoulders. Human memory generally works in two ways: recognition and recall.
And recognition is the easy one.
Right, exactly. Recognition is easy. It's like a multiple choice test. You see the options, and your brain easily identifies the right one. Recall is much harder. It's like a blank page essay question. You have to generate the answer entirely from scratch.
So a blank chat box forces your brain into a constant state of recall.
Yes, every single time you use it.
Which immediately triggers what writers call blank page syndrome. When you can type literally anything, the sheer volume of possibilities paralyzes your decision-making.
Let's break down the actual mental mechanics of what has to happen for you to get a simple task done using an open chat interface. First, you have to understand what the system is even capable of doing.
Because there's no menu to tell you.
Right, which requires pure recall because there are no drop-downs or buttons to guide your expectations. Second, you have to formulate the perfect question or prompt in your head, translating your goal into language the machine will understand.
And then you hit enter and wait.
Yep. Third, you hit enter, wait, and then you have to actively interpret the AI's response.
And then comes the fourth step. which might be the most taxing of all. You have to critically judge whether that response is actually factual or if the AI just hallucinated the answer.
The hallucination problem is huge.
And let's do a quick ELI 5 explain, like even 5 on hallucinations for anyone who isn't deep in the AI weeds. When an AI hallucinates, it isn't lying on purpose, is it?
No, not at all. These systems don't pull facts from a database. They are essentially highly advanced predictive text engines guessing the next most likely word in a sentence.
Right. So sometimes they string together words that sound incredibly confident and plausible, but are entirely factually incorrect.
Which means the burden of fact-checking falls entirely on you. You can never just trust the output blindly. You have to act as an auditor.
Which sounds like a lot of work.
It is. And finally, because that first generated answer is rarely exactly what you wanted, you enter the 5th step, iteration. You have to refine your prompt, ask the system to adjust its tone or fix an error, and start the whole cognitive loop over again.
Man, when you break down those 5 steps, you realize why most users just give up and go back to doing the task manually. I mean, if I just want to generate my weekly sales report, I do not want to go through a 5-step mental gymnastics routine just to get the data.
Absolutely. This massive cognitive load is particularly devastating for everyday, recurring tasks. On top of the mental effort, chat interfaces suffer from a severe lack of consistency.
Consistency is so important for software.
It's everything. With chat, precision is inherently low and predictability is incredibly limited.
Wait, let's explore that inconsistency. Why does the exact same prompt sometimes give you a completely different result on a Tuesday than it did on a Monday?
It happens for a variety of complex technical reasons behind the scenes. It could be subtle changes in how you phrase the prompt, updates to the model's backend weights, or the limitations of hidden context windows.
Ah, context windows. Let's define hidden context windows for the listener so we aren't throwing around too much jargon.
Good idea.
The context window is essentially the AI's short-term working memory during your conversation. It can only hold a certain number of words or tokens in its head at one time.
Right, it fills up.
Yeah, so if your chat gets too long, it literally forgets the instructions you gave it at the very beginning of the conversation, which completely changes how it responds to you later on.
And the downstream effect of that limited memory is that users can't rely on the tool to behave predictably. We rely on software for consistency.
Because we want it to just work.
Exactly. Users do not want to have to actively reason their way to the correct answer every single time they log in to do a mundane task.
Yeah.
They want control, and they want the ironclad consistency of knowing that clicking button A will always result in outcome B.
But the boundless nature of chat destroys that consistency.
It completely undermines
It totally shifts the dynamic of who is actually doing the work. Think about going out to eat at a nice restaurant.
Okay, I love a good restaurant analogy.
You sit down, you are tired from a long day, and you are ready to relax and let someone else take care of you. But instead of the waiter handing you a beautifully curated menu with specific dishes to choose from,
They hand you something else.
the waiter just hands you a blank piece of paper and a pen. They look at you and say, write down exactly what raw ingredients you want us to source, specify the exact mathematical proportions of those ingredients, and then write out step-by-step instructions for how the chef should cook them.
You would immediately leave that restaurant.
You would walk right out the door. Because it completely shifts the entire responsibility of decision-making away from the service provider, the product you were paying for, and dumps the entire burden right onto you, the user.
You went to the restaurant to have the chef guide your experience and provide a great outcome, not to do the chef's job for them.
Exactly.
And that restaurant scenario is Reidenhag's exact point in the Intunio article. Instead of the digital product guiding you, strategically constraining your options, and actively carrying the mental load, the human is expected to hold the entire problem space in their own mind.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is. Dumping the problem space onto the user is the hallmark of lazy UX design.
We are seeing these chat interfaces everywhere, though, from the biggest search engines to specialized enterprise software. We can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater.
No, we definitely can.
There has to be a functional reason this interface is so popular beyond just being cheap for developers to build. We need to clearly define where this Swiss Army knife actually belongs in our daily workflows.
What's fascinating here is that the Intunio philosophy doesn't argue that chat is fundamentally useless.
Okay, so it has a place.
It argues that chat is highly situational. It is a powerful tool, but almost exclusively for open, exploratory phases of work. Think about the times when you don't actually know what you need the final output to look like.
Like when you're just starting a project.
Yeah. You are in the early phases of tackling a complex problem,
Mm.
or you are trying to learn the basics of a brand new topic, or you are engaged in pure, unstructured ideation. You are comparing different historical perspectives, or essentially just thinking out loud to see what ideas bounce back at you.
That makes sense.
In those specific scenarios, the boundless conversational flexibility of chat is a massive strength.
Because in an exploratory phase, going off topic isn't a bug, it's a feature. You can ask tangential follow-up questions, pivot the entire conversation based on a new idea, and willingly go down a rabbit hole just to see where it leads.
In that exploratory context, the chat interface acts as cognitive support. It is actively helping you map out the unknown boundaries of a new subject.
Right.
But, and this is the crucial distinction, that product designers keep missing cognitive support, is not the same thing as a production tool.
So it is essentially like having a brilliant brainstorming buddy rather than a reliable factory worker.
That's a great way to think about it.
You sit in a room with your brainstorming buddy to come up with wild, out-of-the-box ideas, but you wouldn't want that same buddy standing next to you constantly questioning the philosophical nature of the process when it is time to actually screw the widgets together on the assembly line.
No, you just want to get the widgets assembled.
Exactly. But let me challenge this distinction because it sounds perfectly neat and tidy in theory. How do we, and more importantly, how does the listener analyzing their own tools know when a task officially crosses that invisible line?
That's the million-dollar question.
When does a task graduate from being unformulated ideation, where a chat box is great, to structured production, where a chat box becomes a massive burden?
Identifying that boundary is the defining challenge of modern software design. To find the answer, the listener really needs to reflect on their own day-to-day work habits.
Like doing a time audit.
Yeah. Ask yourself right now, think about the 8 hours you spend at your keyboard today. How much of that time is genuinely spent exploring a brand new, unstructured topic versus how much time are you just trying to execute a known, recurring task?
I mean, if I look at my own schedule.
How often are you just trying to file an expense report, format a slide deck, or pull a specific data point for a client meeting?
If we are being honest, for most of us, 80 to 90% of our day is pure execution. It is production. It is getting the mundane things done that we already know we need to get done.
And the interface provided to you by the software should match your intent in that exact moment.
That makes total sense.
If your intent is to explore the unknown, a chat box is wonderful. But if your intent is to execute a known task, and the software still forces you into an open-ended dialogue, the interface has fundamentally failed you.
Which brings us to the holy grail of this entire deep dive. If the chat box is just for brainstorming and exploration, what on earth should artificial intelligence actually look like when we are trying to execute our 80%?
When we want the software to do the heavy lifting.
Exactly, when we just want to get things done quickly without the cognitive heavy lifting.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where we arrive at Intunio's core philosophy, the concept of invisible AI.
Invisible AI, tell me about that.
When a task is recurring, when it has a defined structural output, or when the consequences of a mistake are high, the artificial intelligence needs to be heavily restrained by the user interface design.
Restrained, meaning the interface actively puts guardrails on that boundless freedom we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So instead of making me stare at an open text box, the software offers what the article calls constrained choices. Let me see if I can guess what that looks like in practice. Do you mean something like when my email application reads a message from a colleague, and instead of asking me to type a reply, it just provides 3 short, pre-written response buttons at the bottom of the screen?
That is a perfect example of a constrained choice. To understand why that is so powerful, we need to look at the invisible mechanics of how that actually works in the background.
The intelligence is still there, right?
Well, the intelligence is absolutely still there, but it is hidden. When you click on that email from your colleague, the system doesn't wait for you to type a prompt. Instead, the software automatically runs a hidden mini-prompt in the background.
Oh, I see.
It sends the text of the email to the LLM with invisible instructions saying, analyze the intent of this email, generate 3 distinct professional 2-word replies, and return them as button labels. The AI does the heavy lifting of parsing the context and generating the text, but the UI constrains your interaction to a simple multiple-choice decision.
The genius of that is that it shifts my brain from recall back to recognition. I didn't have to formulate a prompt or suffer from blank page syndrome. I just had to make a quick editorial choice by clicking one of the three buttons.
The article also highlights other invisible patterns, like intelligent autofill and background prioritization. Think about the software you use for your own expense reports.
Ugh, expense reports.
Right, nobody likes them. But if the AI invisibly parses your uploaded receipts, categorizes the vendors, and pre-fills the entire data entry form, it reduces your physical and mental effort down to near zero.
That sounds like a dream.
But crucially, it never removes your human control. You still have to hit approve or hit the tab key to accept the AI's invisible work.
So you're still the one flying the plane.
Yes. The AI is also brilliant at sorting massive lists of priorities for you in the background, supporting your decision-making process organically, rather than forcing you to ask a chatbot what your priorities should be today.
So when AI is implemented correctly, the intelligence is baked directly into the buttons, the drop-down menus, and the sliders that we already intuitively know how to use.
That's the goal.
It doesn't require a separate walled-off dialog box that disrupts our workflow.
That is the Intunio approach in a nutshell. A good designer starts by looking at the user's specific task, not by looking for an excuse to use a flashy AI interface. They integrate the machine intelligence seamlessly into the existing UI controls.
Which is probably harder to sell to an investor.
It definitely is. Now, as Reidenhag readily admits in the article, this invisible approach is often much less spectacular in a flashy sales demo. You aren't wowing the executives with a magical, unpredictable chatbot conversation.
Because there's nothing spinning on the screen and no text magically typing out word by word to show off how smart the computer is.
But for you, the person actually using the software every single day, it creates massive, long-term, real value. It feels magical precisely because it is incredibly fast, it is genuinely helpful, and yet it remains completely understandable and predictable.
Because there's no mystery.
Exactly. You are never left guessing what the software is going to do next.
It makes me think of an airplane's co-pilot.
Oh, how so?
Well, if you are the pilot in command trying to fly a complex route through a storm, you really don't want a co-pilot who constantly taps you on the shoulder, pulling you out of your deep focus, asking open-ended questions like, hey, where should we fly next? How fast do you want to go right now? What exactly do you want me to do with the wing flaps?
That sounds terrifying.
It is. That is what a chat interface feels like. It is needy and distracting. What you actually want is an invisible co-pilot who constantly anticipates the needs of the flight plan based on context.
Working quietly.
Exactly. A co-pilot who just quietly reaches over and adjusts the trim, subtly manages the engine fuel flow in the background, and keeps the plane flying perfectly smooth. The co-pilot is doing incredibly complex, highly intelligent work, but they are doing it invisibly, allowing you to just focus entirely on safely reaching the final destination.
The invisible co-pilot doesn't demand your attention. It frees your attention. And freeing human attention should be the ultimate goal of integrating any artificial intelligence into our daily tools.
So what does this all mean for us? If we zoom out and look at where our digital lives are actually heading, it seems pretty clear that the long-term future of software is not going to be driven by an endless proliferation of chat systems. We aren't going to end up with 100 different chat boxes in 100 different applications.
No, I highly doubt it. The novelty of the raw chat interface is already beginning to wear off for everyday users.
People are definitely getting fatigued by it.
The real future of AI isn't about having more conversations with machines. It is simply about building better tools. Tools that require less mental formulation from you, less tedious interpretation of ambiguous answers, and vastly less cognitive effort just to get through your morning tasks.
When AI truly does its job best, it demands absolutely no extra work from you. It is barely noticed at all. It's just your software working remarkably better than it used to.
Beautifully said.
So the next time you open a program to do some actual work and you feel that familiar wave of exhaustion wash over you because you have to figure out how to write the perfect prompt just to get a basic task done, I want you to remember this deep dive. Take a deep breath and remind yourself. It isn't your fault.
No, it really isn't.
You are bad at writing prompts. You are just the victim of incredibly lazy UX design.
It is empowering for users to realize that the burden of communication shouldn't fall on their shoulders. The builders and developers need to step up, do the hard work of design, and build the invisible systems we actually deserve.
Which leaves us with one final kind of wild thought to mull over as we wrap up. If Intunio's design philosophy wins out over the next few years, and the ultimate goal of UX design is to make AI completely 100% invisible in our daily workflows, At what point do we stop realizing we are interacting with artificial intelligence at all?
It's a trippy concept.
If the chat box completely disappears and the interface just flawlessly anticipates our needs, drafts our emails, and files our reports with a single click, are we eventually going to forget the AI is even running in the background?
We probably will.
Are we just going to start assuming our software is magically reading our minds? Because the next time you are forced to stare down a blinking cursor in a blank chat box, just remember, true intelligence doesn't need to loudly announce itself. It just quietly gets the job done.